Welcome to the Mindful Mama Movement podcast. I'm Shannon Kinney-Duh, creator of AFreeSpiritLife.com.
And I'm Ashley Walburn, owner of Home Holistic. And together, we are bringing you the Mindful Mama Movement.
Mindful mothering is about nurturing your heart and soul while you nurture your children. It's about consciously awakening to your inner wisdom and being peacefully present as a mama, no matter where you are on your journey. From discovering your newborn to loving and accepting the wonderful people who've left your nest. Our movement is empowering mamas to be authentic and to live inspired lives. We're so happy you're here. Hey everyone, it's Shannon. Welcome to episode 26 of the Mindful Mama Movement podcast. In today's show, Ashley and I decided to try something different. Normally, we interview a guest or Ashley and I chat about a topic. And in honor of Mother's Day, we thought that we'd take this show and next to share some personal stories about our own journey into motherhood. So this show, I'll be sharing my story, and next week it will be Ashley's turn. I thought today I would tell you a little bit more about my birth stories. I'll give you a short version of the first one and the second, and then lead into the third because it's kind of a full circle moment for me. All of the births were so completely different, and it was especially powerful for me when I had my third birth. What I've learned about being a mom to these sweet boys is that, one, we all have our own timing. We all bloom in different times. We're all different in how we experience life. And I've learned how to be more sensitive to that. I've learned how to let go of wanting things to be a certain way. And I've really learned what it means to not be afraid. To not be afraid anymore, to not live in fear, to not let fear drive my decisions, to really face my own courage, to be brave, and to learn how to trust myself, to learn how to trust my children, to learn how to trust life. And I've really found that inner trusting and that inner bravery through these births and through being a mom. So my first birth was 9.5 years ago, which I cannot believe. As you all know, the time just goes so fast, and my 9-year-old is just getting so big. He's getting so tall, and his feet are so long. And the short version of his birth story is that it was 2 days of labor. It was long. I had these ideas of having this natural birth, unmedicated. I went 27 hours without any drugs, and I was exhausted. I got sick all throughout the labor. I had no energy left to give. And finally, around that 27th hour, my midwife thought it might be a good idea to do an epidural. I was stalled at 9.5 centimeters, and just nothing was progressing. And I was so defeated at that time. I just remember being frustrated and feeling like a failure. And of course, now I know that that's just not the case. But in the midst of it, I really did feel like I was failing myself, failing my baby. I had this preconceived idea, of what I wanted it to be. And in that moment, it was crashing down. It wasn't going to happen. I ended up getting an epidural, and I think that was probably the worst part of it. The guy giving me the epidural had to redo it 5 times in the midst of heavy contractions, and I was so horribly in pain. I just remember looking at my husband thinking, when is he going to punch this guy in the face? This is so miserable. And I kept redoing it. And finally it went through. And I got to rest. And I rested for about an hour or so. until 3.5 hours of pushing when Keston finally entered the world on a Wednesday night in 2008. And I remember when he came out into the world, he had this cautious look on his face. Since then, we've learned that this sweet boy is cautious, and he unfolds and blooms in his own timing. And so that's taken some practice to get used to as a parent. You know, when I take him to gymnastics class, he was always the one gripping my leg. He never wanted me to leave. At story time, he always had to be in my lap. You know, it was constantly like that. And to this day, you know, he still is cautious. He still has a hard time talking to new people or in new situations. And yet he's so brave. And just yesterday, he had his first piano recital, and it was such a joy as a mom to a quieter, reserved kid to see him just go up there and play his songs. And he felt so proud of himself. He did his bow, and it was just awesome. So he's really taught me a lot about just being okay in being different, in letting yourself have the time that you need to put yourself out there. So flash forward from his birth to 2.5 years later. This would have been October in 2010 when my Ashton was born. So Ashton was 6 days past his due date. And I remember, for those of you who've been in a yoga class with Ashley, she was my prenatal yoga teacher, and I was there the night before he was born. I was in her class. I was way overdue, which it felt like anyways. And I just knew something was coming. I remember leaving her class and just feeling like this is it. So I felt really prepared, and I'm kind of a planner in nature. So I was like, I've got the healthy diet down. I've got the doula. I've got the midwife. I've got the attentive husband. I've got my affirmations. I had my birthing ball. I had my evening primrose. I went to prenatal yoga throughout my pregnancy. I went to prenatal chiropractic care. I had evening meditations. I had prayer beads. I was reading Birthing from Within. I had my relaxing birth CDs ready. I mean, seriously, bring it on, right? I was so ready for this birth. And as you all are probably laughing right now, you know that there's only so much prep we can do, but these births, these babies, these moments, they happen on their own, don't they? A lot of it's about surrendering and letting go of control. But in this, planning and pre-preparing, I was like, I want to control this. I've got this down. It's going to be a natural birth. It's going to go fast. It's going to, be according to plan. So Wednesday, October 13th, 3 a.m., I woke up to what felt like just mild, menstrual cramps. I knew that this was the start to something, but I also knew it was just the beginning and that I had time because, like I said, my first birth was 27 hours just of labor. So it was like 2 days before I had this baby. So I felt like, okay, I've got some time here. I went downstairs for a bowl of cereal, I drank some water, and then I went back to bed. At 4:45 a.m., I woke up to what felt like a trickle, which I assumed was my water breaking. So I got up and I told Chris that this was the day. He loaded up the car because, of course, I had my hospital bag packed for weeks. I had everything, prepared. He called my midwife. He called my doula, who was Ashley, and he called my mom to give them all a heads up. They all knew we had time. My mom was going to come over and she would take care of Keston for the day. My midwife wanted me to labor at home for as long as possible to avoid getting to the hospital too early. And of course, Ashley said, she'd be on the lookout for my next call. 5:15, so that was at 4:45 a.m. At 5:15 a.m., which is just 30 minutes later, I started feeling incredible labor pains. The contractions jumped into high gear. I was shocked at that point at how painful it already felt. And I secretly wondered, how did I do this for 27 hours last time? Still thinking we had plenty of time, considering that the first birth I was laboring at home for at least 12 hours before I went to the hospital. So Keston woke up. He was 2.5 at the time, and he joined us in the bathroom. I remember he had his doggy jammies on, and he was holding a sock monkey in his hand. He was quiet, and he was very in tune. Like, he knew, right, that baby brother was on his way. He knew that I was in pain, and he was even trying to make me laugh. So 5:30, 15 minutes later, I felt the urge to push already. All of a sudden, my contractions shifted, and I thought I might have to push him out in the bathroom. My mom still wasn't there, and I knew that if we didn't get to the hospital quick, it was going to be birthing in my bathroom. So we all got in the car, and Chris, as always, was so calm. He's like super, super calm in stressful situations. And Keston was in his pajamas, and I was in the front seat on my knees. And I had to keep my hand in between my legs because I just felt like he was going to come. And oh gosh, I remember that so well. I was holding him in. And Keston's going, "Mommy, do you see the train?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, yes, I see the train." So I never knew what it felt like to push before because my first birth, I didn't get to that point. So this point, I definitely knew, like, all I wanted to do was push this baby out. And I, felt like I just skipped over the entire labor and I was just ready to push. So all my preparation to have this natural birth was now coming into play. My breath and my mind had to fully connect. And here I was closing my eyes and I had to go to a deep, deep present moment place where only Ashton and I were communicating with each other. And I remember just talking to him. I'm like, "Hold on, baby. Don't come yet. Just a little longer. Breathe." And I was breathing. "Hold on. We can do this." And I just was talking to him and breathing. Chris called my mom and told her to turn around and to meet us at the hospital. He called my midwife and he called Ashley, my doula, and to tell him about the situation. So they booked it to the hospital. I could tell that meconium was coming out. Because, and that's the baby's poop. I'm sure most of you know what that is. Because I could see it. My hand was down there and I could see it and I just was worried. I started to get worried. So Chris was surprisingly calm, driving the car, getting us there. And I remember hearing him say that he was telling the midwife, and they said if we have to pull over to call 911. And I'm like, "Oh my God, no." I just kept talking to Ashton. "Just stay in there. We're going to make this." And I'm really glad we didn't pull over. So at 6 a.m., we pulled into the emergency room and Chris waved to a nurse to come and help. She brought a wheelchair for me and I was on my knees the whole time. And I just remember grabbing her tightly and feeling a small sense of relief that at least we made it and that I'd get to push. All I wanted to do was get to that hospital so I could start pushing. So once I was wheeled into the maternity ward and it felt like, seriously, I looked up and it felt like one of those hospital dramas that you see on TV, like everyone from behind the desk just ran. They saw what I was doing and saying, and they all just ran to me and pushed me into the first room. So that was like kind of alarming, but also again, a sense of relief, like, oh my gosh, they're here to help me. Ashton was the only birth that entire day. So the floor had been quiet and there was plenty of staff ready to go. And I remember one nurse started to take off my nightgown, and even in the pain, I somehow had the clarity to say, "I am not wearing that." She wanted to put one of the hospital gowns on me. But of course, according to my plan, I had picked out the perfect nightgown that I was going to birth in, right? So I made sure that I was not going to wear a hospital gown. And anyways, that was just kind of funny because I was still like trying to control things. So I laid on my side and there was a nurse, Jessica, and she put an oxygen mask over my face. And I could see her face kind of distorted through that mask. And with each urge to push, she'd talk me through my breaths, and I begged her to help me. And she did, staring into my eyes, feeling her squeeze my hands. And breathing with her helped me. My mind kept repeating, trust, trust, trust. Here I was, laying in a bright hospital room with what felt like hundreds of people coming in and out. A far cry from the quiet, dark, candlelit, soaking tub, aromatherapy, acupressure, soft music experience I had envisioned. A nurse checked me. She announced that I was complete and that it was a boy. She could feel his testicles coming out, which thank God I already knew it was a boy because that would be kind of shocking to find out that way. Wait, where's his head? Ashton had been head down for weeks. In fact, I was just checked on that Monday and he was supposedly head down. This was Wednesday. I never felt a huge flip. So how could he all of a sudden be breech? Nurse Jessica said I would have to have a C-section. Trust, trust, trust is what I kept repeating. At 6:10 a.m., my midwife arrived. Thank God, I thought. She'll prove my nurse is wrong. She'll tell me he's head down, that we can push now, and then I'll be holding my baby boy in no time. No. She affirmed what the nurses so matter-of-factly declared. Emergency C-section was the only way to ensure a safe delivery of our baby who was completely breech. My husband was back after handing Keston off to Nana in the lobby. I stared into his eyes and said, Bubs, I can't believe this. He whispered back as calmly as he always is, everything will be okay. There was lots of commotion, including getting an epidural that quickly took the pain away. They counted to 3 and hoisted me with a sheet onto another bed and wheeled me into the operating room. Someone put a surgical cap on my head, and I remember thinking that it was crooked and half of my hair was sticking out on one side. I felt exposed. I felt scared. I couldn't believe this was happening. At 6:30 a.m., I was ready for surgery. Chris came in and looked at me. He got close to my ear and said with total confidence, You came into the world this way, and look how wonderful you turned out. In that moment, I felt peace come over me. I had survived being breech with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, which resulted in an emergency C-section for my mom. I survived. I was okay. I was healthy. My mom healed beautifully. We can do this. Chris was to my left. The nurse was to my right. Both were holding my hands, and I was tightly squeezing back. Then I took some breaths. I relaxed into that moment. My mantra now changed to accept, accept, accept. I remembered how Eckhart Tolle says we have 3 choices in any situation: enthusiasm, excitement, or acceptance. In that moment, I knew that I couldn't resist anymore. My body was forced to completely surrender. Now my mind and spirit were ready to make peace and let go, to accept that this is the way my baby was going to enter the world, and to trust that everything is going to be okay. At 6:56 a.m., Ashton Quinn took his first breath. It seemed like it took a few minutes, as they had to make sure he didn't take in any meconium. Finally, I could hear him. I still couldn't see him. I had to accept that his umbilical cord was cut before it stopped pulsing. I had to accept that my husband would not be the one cutting the cord. I had to accept that Ashton wasn't handed directly to my chest. Accept, accept, accept. Finally, someone held him up so I could see him. Major relief and a flood of tears. I quickly scanned to make sure he had all his fingers and toes. He was beautiful, so gentle and so sweet looking. He seemed to say, I'm okay. I'll be in your arms soon. Truly, that's how he's always been. They kept Ashton in the room with us, and Chris stayed there holding his hand until it was time to return to our room. It took about 20 minutes for them to stitch me back up. At 7:30 a.m., Ashton was in my arms and nursing like a champ. That birth was such a shock to me. It happened so fast, and truly, I never considered that I'd have a C-section. And so I learned a lot about myself during that time. It took a good full 2 years, really, to heal, to grieve that I wasn't going to have the birth that I had envisioned with him. But I have learned a lot about acceptance. There are things that happen in life that we can't change, that we don't have control over. And that was a big lesson from Ashton's birth. So flash again 2.5 years, September 2013, when my Grayson was born. So on that particular day in September, I had not been feeling good all week. I felt this deep desire to stay close to home. I was 39 weeks pregnant. Thursday morning rolled around, and I heard that usual call of my 3-year-old from his bedroom. "Mommy, are you there?" I got out of bed and felt something subtly different. Was that my water breaking, I thought? But I blew it off. I had a lot to do in that short hour. Deep down, I knew that this was probably the day, but it was also the day that my 5-year-old had his first school pictures in kindergarten, and my 3-year-old had his first day of gymnastics. And so I had to get ready, right? So I got the boys ready, got myself ready, and we headed to the carpool lane. After I dropped off my oldest son to school, I felt a relief, and I called my mom just to let her know I was on the way. The midwife wanted me to stop by her office for a visit to do a labor check. So I dropped off my 3-year-old at my mom's, left them their overnight bag, and switched the car seats just in case to head to the hospital for my appointment. It was a hot morning. It was the last day of that summer heat, and it was still just lingering. And for whatever reason, I didn't want to give birth on a hot day. So I was hoping that this was not the day. But a shift in the weather was coming that night, and it was also a full moon. So it was kind of hard to avoid that one. So the visit with my midwife confirmed what I really already knew, that yes, my water broke. And because my last labor went so fast, they wanted me to head over to the hospital and check in. And that was really incredibly strange for me because my first birth, I showed up at the hospital in the middle of the night in deep labor. My second birth, I was wheeled into the labor and delivery unit ready to push. And here I am walking myself into the hospital on this bright, sunny morning, pulling in my own suitcase, feeling no pain. It was just weird. I called my husband, and he said he'd be there in 30 minutes. My midwife was off that day, so the on-call midwife and student would be there to assist. My doula, who again was Ashley, was out of town, so I had an on-call doula, and I felt very emotional about this. I'm like, what? What do you mean my team that I so carefully handpicked wasn't going to be here on my most important day? I was really kind of terrified at first. So I was going to be under the care of women that I had never met before. The on-call doula sensed my anxiety about this, and she headed to the hospital right away. She turned out to be so wonderful. And as the day transpired, I quickly learned that having both her and the on-call midwives was exactly what I needed. It was just kind of meant to be. Which, by the way, I have to just add that I am so incredibly grateful for midwives and amazing intuitive doulas. They are truly your birthing gifts. So I checked into the hospital around 10 a.m. and I met my doula right then and there. And my husband came in as well. And then the constant monitoring began, which for those of you know who've had a hospital birth. So here I was really wanting a home birth, but I just had I had C-section a couple years prior. And so I chose to have a hospital birth, but I was going for a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after C-section. But since I was labeled that, the hospital has certain procedures that they must follow. And one of them is that they have to be monitoring the baby and me every hour for 20 minutes. And although I was told during pregnancy that the hospital had 4 wireless monitors that would allow me to be mobile, the nurse informed me that they didn't have any wireless monitors. And I was really frustrated because that meant I was bound to a bed and I had to sit there with the monitor. So there I was, sitting in a bed, no contractions, being monitored and tested on off and on throughout the day. My frustration level started to rise. Had this birth not been a VBAC, I would have probably chosen a home birth. I felt comfortable with my decision to be at the hospital again, but with the constant monitoring and broken expectations, I was starting to feel defeated. I was even told during my pregnancy that I could labor in the big soaking tubs, but now that I was a patient in the hospital, they informed me that they don't allow that for VBACs. I did not want to fight. I knew I needed my energy for what was yet to come, and I was determined to create a peaceful space for my son's entry into the world. So I used my voice. Can everyone please just leave me alone? I need to be left alone for the next 30 minutes. I need time to connect with my husband and my baby. And that's when the shift happened. I felt a sense of empowerment. I was speaking up for myself and the needs of my baby. I needed quiet. I needed space. I needed dark. I needed to connect. I needed to be left alone. Around the same time, a powerful thunderstorm rolled in. I love rain, and this instantly brought me a new sense of energy and strength. My birth vision board gave me the reminders I needed to focus my mind. Yes, I even create vision boards to get me prepared for my birth. My music had set the tone. The connection to my husband and baby brought everything else into alignment. And meditating quietly and alone in the dark helped me enter the zone. After many natural attempts to jumpstart my contractions, the midwife suggested Pitocin. I immediately refused. I remember with my first birth, I received Pitocin after a long, unmedicated 27-hour labor, like I mentioned. And it eventually led to the epidural, and I felt so much sadness that I didn't get to feel my baby come out. I didn't want that to happen again. This is my last chance, I thought, to birth my baby naturally. They are not taking this away from me. I put them off a few more hours, but for anyone who has birthed a baby in a hospital, you know that once your water breaks, they start counting the hours. They really don't like going past the 24-hour mark, and it had been over 12 hours since my water broke earlier that morning. Finally, after there were no signs of labor, my doula told me to think of Pitocin as a tool. She explained that they would start it on a small dose and then turn it off when contractions got going. And for some reason, thinking of it as a tool put me at ease. Again, I didn't want to fight. And I intuitively knew that I was in the right mental and spiritual place. I was ready. I agreed to the Pitocin at around 9 p.m., and shortly after the first dose, my labor began. I had now entered my sacred birth space. I experienced intense labor for about 4 hours. I was supported by my amazing husband and doula. I felt completely present. I went totally inward. I remember occasionally reaching for my husband's hand, Just feeling his presence helped immensely. I kept my eyes closed the entire time. I felt so connected to this baby, and I could feel him swimming into position with each contraction. In between contractions, still keeping my eyes closed, I was smiling. Seriously, I felt bliss. Now, I had been reading stories about women who had felt bliss in labor, and I thought they were insane. And I'm telling you, for those of you who have felt that, you know, I was just in this place where it felt blissful. After having these two other incredibly different births, that moment had arrived, that moment where I felt my baby traveling down with each push. Again, the feeling of bliss came over me in this space between the pushing. The phrase, "I'm not scared anymore," played over and over again in my mind. And that phrase, "I'm not scared anymore," came from my oldest son. His ability to face his own fears helped guide me through this birth. Because just a few days prior to this, he was starting kindergarten. And as I told you, he has always started things slowly and cautiously. And I was really concerned for him that first day of school. And so the morning of kindergarten, we woke up early, and I was talking to him about if he feels nervous at school without us. And he just interrupted me mid-sentence and said, "Mom, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not scared anymore." And that was it. That morning at the first day of school, I dropped him off. We had to stay in the car. He hopped out of the car, shut the door. He looked back at me through the car window, and he had this brave smile on his face, and there he went. As the tears streamed down my face, he was fine. He was not scared anymore. And I used that as encouragement in this birth. I kept repeating, "I'm not scared anymore." And I felt myself opening, softening, easing into this birth. It was absolutely incredible. And it was one of those memories that will live in my heart and soul forever. After 30 minutes of pushing, my baby Grayson was in my arms. Relief, happiness, and love poured over and through me, and poured over and through all of us. We did it. We did it together. The wait was over, and he was here, and he was healthy. And I was so happy. And my heart felt so big and so open. I'm not scared anymore. In that moment, I felt totally in love. And once again, I was changed forever. And that's what motherhood does to us, right? Changes us forever. No matter what stage of motherhood you're in, I know that you have these experiences that change you forever. And they teach us great lessons. These little children who grow into big adults, they are our greatest teachers. And for me and my journey with my boys over these 9 years, I've learned that it's okay to bloom in a different timing, that it's okay to be different, that you don't have to fit in and be like everyone else. I've learned that everything's going to be okay, even when you're going through challenge, that the support of others is huge. I've learned that I can accept that things are going to be out of my control sometimes. I've learned that I don't have to be afraid anymore, that I can be courageous, that I can face my fear, and that I can trust myself as a mother, that I can trust my children, and that I can trust life. I'm not scared anymore. Do I face fear? Absolutely. Do I let it keep me stuck? Not for too long. I look at how brave my kids are, how many fears they face on a daily basis, and I practice doing the same. So for your mindful mama moment today, take some time to first celebrate this beautiful gift of motherhood. Being a mom can make us feel crazy and insane, and we have our freakouts, that's for sure. You are not alone in that. And we also know that it's a gift. It's a gift to treasure and to savor. So wherever you are in your motherhood journey, what have you learned so far from your children? What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about life? Where do you let fear keep you feeling stuck in worry? How can you learn to trust your decisions as a mom, your intuition, and how to trust your children that they are unfolding in their own timing, that life is here to guide and support us? I would love if you could share with us in the Mindful Mama Movement group on Facebook. Join our private group and share in the discussion. How has motherhood changed you, and what are you learning from your kids? Happy pre-Mother's Day to all of you beautiful moms out there. Next week, Ashley will be sharing her story, and then we have more interviews to come. We are so grateful for you for listening. You can check out mindfulmamamovement.com. Our website has all of our past shows there and information about our past guests. And you can also check out my website, afreespiritlife.com, to learn more about my coaching, my life coaching services for moms. And I also have a blog where I share more of these kinds of stories about my struggles and when I stumble and fumble along the way, what I try to learn and what I hopefully can inspire you in your own life to reflect on as well. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.